Blog Talk Radio.
Transition, the process of change from one condition to another.
We are now at a new crossroads where change is evident once again.
What does not serve us must transform us anew.
Returning to our original state of oneness and true nature of that which created who we truly are.
Confusion was the way of the past. Enlightenment is the way of the now and future. Shedding away the layers of deceit.
We now bring you the transformation of the two who started as one. Our fearless planet never stands still.
Earth has been in a process of transition, not exactly remarkable, ongoing reality.
Welcome to Transition Radio.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name's Mark Angelo Cummings, and I am your host.
And I'm Lennon Lopez, and I'll be your hostess.
And we are broadcasting live from the beautiful land of enchantment, Silver City, New Mexico. It just gets more and more beautiful every time.
The sky was so absolutely gorgeous today. Before the
chemtrails, yes, before they start cheming. I mean, I don't know how many of you look up in the sky, but you take a beautiful blue sky and turn it hazy with all them chemtrails.
I mean, I literally saw it happen, like you said it, and then over like 40 minutes later, it gets all dispersed and clouds come, and it's really, really sad.
It's like they're messing with Mother Earth and our weather, and it's just crazy. But we have a little talk about weather, but before we do that, we want to thank our sponsors.
TheBreastformStore.com. They have everything you can imagine to enhance your feminizing needs.
As well as Spunk Lube, an amazing award-winning personal lubricant that's 100% sex toy safe, it's glycerin-free, and it's fun to use. If you like, please visit their website
at spunklube.com.
Enter the code TR, and you will receive a 10% discount because every penny helps. I'm talking about the weather. I mean, it's crazy. All these chemtrailing and all these things that they're using to literally using the weather as a weapon.
It seems like, the whole East Coast got pummeled with all this cold weather this winter time, and the Southern California and the West all got all this dry weather. And California's been having the same weather problem for 4 years now, and they're in like this extreme drought. So this story that's come up talking about the dire conditions that California is faced with is one that we're going to start off with right now.
Yes, for more than a century, California has been the state where people flocked for a better life. 164,000 square miles of mountains, farmland, and coastline, shimmering with ambitions and dreams, money and beauty. It was a cutting-edge symbol of possibility. Hollywood, Silicon Valley, aerospace, agriculture, and vineyards.
But now, a punishing drought and the unprecedented measures the state announced last week to compel people to reduce water consumption is forcing a reconsideration of whether the aspiration of untrammeled growth that has for so long been this state's driving engine has run against the limits of nature itself.
No, I don't really know how much of this is really nature that's doing this, or if it's man-made, or if it's corporate-made, so they could just really increase the price of water and just sell us there.
Well, they have the Pacific Ocean. Don't you think they could figure out how to desalinize the water there?
Oh, I'm sure they can. I'm sure there's ways. But it's just, again, fear tactics and just doing things to improve the life of those that have and disimprove the life of those that have not. Anyway, the 25% cut in water consumption ordered by Governor Jerry Brown raises fundamental questions about what life in California will be like in the years ahead, and even whether the state faces the prospect of people leaving for wetter climates, assuming, as Mr. Brown and other state leaders do, that this marks a permanent change in the climate rather than a particularly severe cyclical drought.
This state has survived many a catastrophe before and defied the doomsayers who have regularly proclaimed the death of the California dream as it emerged often stronger from the challenges of earthquakes, an energy crisis, and most recently a budgetary collapse that forced years of devastating cuts in spending. These days, the economy is thriving, the population is growing, the state budget is in surplus, and development is exploding from Silicon Valley to San Diego. The evidence of it can be seen in the construction cranes dotting the skylines of Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Yeah, I've always wanted to make it to California, and the fear of earthquake, because I thought for sure that the big one was going to sink California.
You saw that movie probably, you know.
Well, I've seen many movies, but it's always been in the back of my mind, and I've always wanted to live there, or at least visit there.
And that's my home state, so, I mean, you know, now with water.
But it seems like it's being attacked by all sorts of different things, you know, earthquakes, the financial, and now the drought. Let's continue here. But even California's biggest advocates are wondering if the severity of this drought, now in its fourth year, is going to force a change in the way the state does business.
Can Los Angeles continue to dominate as the country's capital of entertainment and glamour, and Silicon Valley as the center of high tech, if people are forbidden to take a shower for more than 5 minutes and water bills become prohibitively expensive? Will tourists worry about coming? Will Mickey Mouse be sad because nobody's coming to his park?
Well, there's always Florida.
Will business continue their expansion in places like San Francisco and Venice?
I think it's a plan that Florida has to make California go down so that everybody comes over, and the new Hollywood would be Florida. I know, but hey, you know. Anyway, Mother Nature didn't intend for 40 million people to live here, said Kevin Starr, a historian at the University of Southern California who has written extensively about this state. This is literally a culture that since the 1880s has progressively invented, and reinvented itself. At what point does this invention begin to hit limits?
California's Dr. Starr said it's not going to go under, but we are going to have to go in a different way. An estimated 38.8 million people live in California today, more than double the 15.7 million who lived here in 1960, and the state's labor force exploded to 18.9 million in 2013 from 6.4 million people in 1960.
California's $2.2 trillion economy today is the seventh largest in the world, more than quadruple the $520 billion economy of 1963. Adjusted for inflation, the median household income jumped to an estimated $61,094 in 2013 from $44,772 in 1960, also adjusted for inflation.
That's crazy, though, to think that one state their budget is larger than countries. It's the seventh largest, you know, in the world, not just a state. It's crazy. You just can't live the way you always have, said Mr. Brown, a Democrat who is in his fourth term as governor. For over 10,000 years, people lived in California, but the number of those people were never more than 300,000 or 400,000, Mr. Brown said. Now we are embarked upon an experiment that no one has ever tried. 38 million people with 32 million vehicles living at the level of comfort that we all strive to attain. This will require adjustment. This will require learning.
Maybe they're trying to scare people to not coming and leaving, you know, and who knows.
My dad used to have a bumper sticker on his car that said, "Welcome to California. When you leave, please take someone with you."
Because there is, and it's very expensive to live there. It's crazy. So I don't know what all this, you know, posh, unless you work for Hollywood or have some enormously great job, you know, it's hard to make a living there. Anyway, this disconnect, as it were, can be seen in places like Palm Springs, in the middle of the desert, where daily per capita water use is 201 gallons, more than double the state average. A recent drive through the community offered a drought-defined tableau of burbling fountains, flowers, lush lawns, golf courses, and trees. The smell of mown lawn was in the air.
So if you fly over Palm Springs, there's like green desert.
Wow.
That's how it looks. It's crazy.
So it's these people watering the lawns and creating a freaking drought.
Probably, yeah. But the drought is now forcing changes in a place that long identified itself as America's desert oasis. Palm Springs has ordered a 50% cut in water use by city agencies and plans to replace the lawns and annual flowers around city buildings with native landscapes. great idea.
Right.
It is digging up the grassy median into town that unfurled before visitors like a carpet at a Hollywood premiere. It is paying residents to replace their lawns with rocks and desert plants and offering rebates to people who install low-flow toilets.
You know, it's a great idea. And I love the Southwestern look, the rocks and whatever. I mean, grass is beautiful, but it takes a lot of maintenance. It takes a lot of grass, cutting.
It takes living in an area where there is a lot of rain to keep the grass alive.
And even with a lot of rain, I mean, you know, lawns they take up a lot of the times. I mean, and you have rocks, you don't have to worry about any maintenance or anything of that nature, and at the airport that once welcomed winter chilled tourists with 8 acres of turf and flowers, city officials are in the early stages of replacing the grass with cactus, desert bushes, and Palo Verde trees. The city had hoped to replace the entire lawn, but the project, $2 million price tag, forced it to begin instead with 3 acres, said David Reddy, the city manager.
Years ago, the idea was, come to Palm Springs and people see the grass and the lushness and the green. Mr. Reddy said, we've got to change the way we consume water. Other places face different threats to their way of life. Mayor Robert Silva of Mendota, in the heart of the agricultural Central Valley, said unemployment among farm workers had soared as the soil turned to crust and farmers left half or more of their fields fallow. Many people are traveling 60 or 70 miles to look for work, Mr. Silva said, and families are increasingly relying on food donations. You can't pay the bills with free food, he said. Give me some water, and I know I can go to work. That's the bottom line.
Richard White, a history professor in Stanford University, said the scarcity of water could result in a decline in housing construction at a time when there has been a burst of desperately needed residential development in cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco. It's going to be harder and harder to build new housing without an adequate water supply, he said. How many development can you afford if you don't have water? And also, you know, when you have farming of like cattle, that uses up a lot of water.
Yeah, that uses up a lot of water.
More water than just growing the regular crops. So maybe they need to just, you know, slow down on that.
Stop eating meat.
Exactly. And become vegans like we are.
There you go. Greg Smith, 51, a web developer who works from his home in Escondido, said he was considering moving to Washington State because of his distress. I'm sure it's not D.C.
Right.
Time in the government.
Right.
Because of his distress at what he described as the state's slow response to the drought. He said, if this gets out of control, I'll probably end up leaving, Mr. Smith said. But this has been a problem for as long as I've been alive. I've watched this state get trampled by developers, he added. They keep building homes, but where's the water going to come from?
And that's one thing that a lot of these developers don't really think. And it doesn't just happen in California. It happens in a lot of places. They build surpluses of apartments and houses, and then there's more and more people coming in. They don't realize that the roads really can't take that kind of traffic, you know.
Well, back in the, 30s, I think it was, Owens Valley up in Northern California had its water supply diverted out of the mountains so that they could make this aqueduct that would feed the Los Angeles area. And what happened now is that now that's the place where the largest dust storms in the world happen because of this terrible blight on the natural resource that was up there that was never intended to feed a city hundreds and hundreds of miles away.
Yeah, so someone's not thinking. The governor's executive order mandates a 25% overall reduction in water use throughout the state to be achieved with varying requirements in different cities and villages. The 400 local water supply agencies will determine how to achieve that goal. Much of it is expected to be done by imposing a new restriction on lawn watering. The 25% reduction does not apply to farms, which consume the great bulk of the state water.
State officials signaled on Friday that reductions in water supplies for farmers were likely to be announced in the coming weeks. And there's also likely to be increased pressure on the farms to move away from certain water-intensive crops almonds.
Almonds, I know. And then the almonds are going to go up.
You know,
I think all this is done purposely to just skyrocket things and just freak people out.
Money.
Exactly. You know, and people, instead of planting all these grass and things that don't produce anything, pull out that grass and just plant foods that don't require a lot of watering, that actually the roots will...
The kind that are indigenous to the area.
Exactly.
You know, plant plant things that are going to be a natural fit for the area.
Mayor Eric Garcetti of Los Angeles pointed to Mr. Brown's executive order and his own city's success in reducing water consumption. Said he was confident that the state would find ways to deal with an era of reduced water supplies in a way that would permit it to continue to grow and thrive. We have to deal with a new normal, Mr. Garcetti said. That said, do we have enough water to sustain life here? Absolutely. Do we have enough water to grow economically? Of course we do. Cities that are much drier and truly desert, like Phoenix and Las Vegas, have shown the ability to have economic growth, he said.
Well, Mr. Garcetti is a politician, so why would he say that his city's not going to be able to function?
He doesn't want to create major havoc.
Do we have enough water to grow economically? I mean, I'm sure he's going to say yes to that.
Exactly.
Alan Zarenberg, president of the California Chamber of Commerce, rejected the idea that the drought and the state's response to it would prompt industries to move away or stop adding jobs. The rest of the economy is managing it, learning how to deal with it, he said.
This is hardly the first crisis California has faced. There has always been a tension between the natural beauty and delights of living in California and the external threats, be they the dizzying ups and downs of the state budget, or the rolling blackouts during the energy crisis in 2000 and 2001, or what about the earthquakes or periodic droughts? Cities that are much drier and truly desert, like Phoenix and Las Vegas, have shown the ability to have economic growth.
Well, people on the East Coast, they always want to say that the glow of California is gone. I've heard it before. As a Californian, it's annoying to hear sometimes. But Felicia Marcus said it, the head of the State Water Resources Control Board, which is putting into effect a 25% reduction in water use ordered by Governor Brown last week. It isn't. I don't see it as any diminishment about our prospect of growth. There has to be a more evolved way about using the resources that we have. We have a long way to go before we tapped out the Colorado River. The resources aren't there unless they go digging in the Pacific Ocean.
If they would just stop messing with chemtrails and stop messing with the weather, the normalcy would return. Anyway, the critical question is the extent to which Mr. Brown has succeeded in persuading people here to shake long-held habits and assumptions.
I'm not going to stop watering, said Matthew Post, 45, referring to the gardens around his Benedict Canyon home. The state does not even know how to arrange its own resources that they have, and so we have to pay for it. They say that they will raise the prices because there's a drought. But when the drought ends, will they reduce the prices?
Of course not, but much like the gold rush more than 150 years ago or the rise of Silicon Valley, the assumption of cheap and abundant water has been a crucial part of California's identity, history, and economy.
And until recently, it seemed that the California dream was sustainable. Blooming cities, wide lawns in the suburbs, green golf courses, and an otherwise parched landscape. And above all, a vibrant agricultural sector in places where it's not much wetter than a desert.
Although there were serious droughts in the mid-1970s and late 80s, the current water shortage and last week's executive order are a turning point for the state. In the West more generally, water experts say the idea, at least until the latter part of the 20th century, was the water would be cheap and plentiful, and the focus was on developing new supplies, said Heather Cooley, Water Program Director for the Pacific Institute and Environmental Research Group based in Oakland. Folks realize we have now reached the limits of supply, so the focus is on demand.
While the mandatory cuts in home water use are the first ever, efficiency has been slowly gaining ground in recent decades. Total water use in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and many other urban areas is now lower than it was in 1980 when I was 10, despite the huge economic growth and population increases.
Well, the latest restriction represents a culture of change, as well as lifestyle one, going well beyond taking shorter showers and foregoing the Sunday afternoon ritual of hosing down the family car.
Half of residential use is outdoors, primarily lawns, Ms. Cooley said, and what California sees as beautiful, she said, has been a lawn. That has been the standard for front yards and backyards.
Well, now with utilities paying people to replace Thursday traditional grass turf with water-sipping native plants and other drought-tolerant shrubbery, long-held aesthetics are shifting. This will change what Californians see as beautiful, she said.
But even a significant drop in residential water use will not move the consumption needle nearly as much as even a small reduction by farmers of all the surface water consumed in the state. Roughly 80% is earmarked for the agricultural sector.
Well, the big question is agriculture, and are there different trades-off that need to be made? Said Katrina Josoe, assistant professor of agriculture and resource economics at the University of California, Davis.
Bill Metzler, a bond broker, walking his dog on a sunny morning in Golden State Park in San Francisco, said he was worried about the drought, about the prospect of higher fines for using too much water, and about what might happen to the agriculture industry. But he said he was not worried about the future of the state.
The dream of California now is probably different than back in 1960, he said. Now it's more financial opportunity. I think before it was what we're looking at now. Great weather, beach weather, tremendous diversity of lifestyle. Really, if you cannot find your lifestyle in the state, there's something wrong with you.
Dr. Starr, the University of Southern California historian, said the crisis would force California to do what was needed to carry on. Our destiny is not just to be a fantasy place, he said. As much as we enjoy the good life in California, we have to come to terms with Mother Nature, with our arid environment.
Every time California has a problem, we ran out of electricity in the early 2000s, then we ran out of money, and now we're running out of water. People say California is over. Dr. Starr said, it's not over. It's too important a part of American culture to be over, but it would change itself. Yeah, I say there's going to have to be lots of changes. People are going to have to learn to take shorter showers, you know. And I think that the whole world is looking at this, not just California. We're going to have to be less materialistic and more conservative and more earthy.
That's the idea, you know, that's the good plan to go with, you know. But out in Indiana, we have a bigger problem.
Yes.
Of, you know, an HIV outbreak.
Yes.
How ironic that it would be Indiana where all the news came from last week about the religious rights bill.
Yes.
Donald Spicer slowed his police car to a crawl. As he pointed out, shooting galleries, paint-chipped houses with broken windows and rotting wood, where addicts inject liquid painkillers and lose all sense of time.
Liquid painkillers, that's crazy. They use needles often lie in plain sight in the cracked streets, in the garbage-filled gutters, or patchy lawns. This is a common problem, the police chief said. This isn't anything new to us.
Spicer now finds his rural hometown at the core of the state's worst ever outbreak of HIV, one so grave that Governor Mike Pence declared a health emergency last week. Pence also authorized a short-term needle exchange to fight the virus spread, an exception to Indiana's conservative anti-drug policy that bars programs to trade dirty needles for clean ones.
But the Austin lifelong residents, the rash of infection, is a symptom of a deep-rooted problem dating back decades. There is a lack of opportunity here, Spicer said. Few jobs, few resources, and even fewer things to do, so people get bored and they inject painkillers.
We've always been a step behind and struggling to keep our heads above water, he said. He paused for a moment at a faded single-story home that once knew better days. The empty house could be torn down, he said, as part of a city program to remove blight. That's my grandmother's house, he said.
Austin, founded in 1853, was once best known as an important rail stop between Indianapolis and Louisville, Kentucky, a city of 4,200 residents. It's surrounded by farmland, but also has 4 large manufacturing plants. A semi-truck drives products up and down nearby Interstate 65. Drug deals, addiction, and prostitutions have found their way here as well. So why pick on the gays if they have all this big issue here?
I know, right? This year, Spicer said the police department has made 59 drug-related arrests. I can't say that's not normal, he said. The state declared an emergency after health officials reported 81 HIV-positive tests last week, 74 confirmed, and 7 preliminary cases related to the outbreak in southeastern Indiana. Almost all the confirmed cases have been from Austin, said Dr. William Cook, medical director at Foundation Family Medicine. That number is expected to rise.
A new HIV clinic backed by health officials opened at Cook's office in Austin on Tuesday. The average patient here with the human immunodeficiency virus, which causes AIDS, is 20 to 30 years old with no insurance or access to medical care. Many lack Social Security numbers and birth certificates. In addition to offering the needle exchange program and counseling, the clinic will help patients get such documents.
Opiate addiction cropped up here in the late 90s, Spicer said, when OxyContin made its way down Interstate 65 and into Scott County. But when the formula for OxyContin changed, so did addicts' habits. They chased a different high, Opana, a pill that can also be injected and is tied to the current HIV outbreak.
1 quart of a pound of pills sells for $60 to $80 on the street. That's crazy. Although he is grateful for the governor's assistance and the influx of resources that have poured into Austin, Spicer worries about the long-term effect.
Don't come in here for 30 days and think you've got it fixed and leave, he said. We'll still be here 10 years from now dealing with it.
The median household income in Austin is about $33,000 a year, compared to the statewide figure of $48,000. The poverty rate is about 26%, and 19% in surrounding Scott County. According to the census figure, statewide is 15.4%.
Cook said he noticed an unhealthy environment years ago as the county's overdose rate continues to rise. It was only a matter of time, he thought then, until HIV set in.
Like Spicer, Cook knows that the key to controlling the city's HIV epidemic is long-term care. Infectious disease doctors will be helping at the clinic indefinitely, he said. Once the outbreak is under control, which could take up to 6 months, then we can transition to a primary care model for HIV, Cook said.
Even then, he would like to have infectious disease doctors come to Austin once a month. It would be detrimental to come in to do something independent, meet their goals, and leave, Cook said. We were here before this hit, and we will be here long before and after it goes away.
Many Austin residents are concerned that dealing with the HIV outbreak does not address the city's root problem. The city is resistant to change, they said, and has lost development opportunities to Scottsburg, its neighboring city.
Harry Amick recalled the Austin of his youth, a city with a Greyhound bus station and restaurants lining the downtown promenade. We have businesses here, merchants, a movie show, said Amick, 70. The bus station and theater closed long ago, he said, as did many restaurants. I don't want to be around this. Austin has fallen apart.
Samantha Collins grew up strolling around Austin with her friends. She would walk to school, but now Collins said she would never let her son walk alone the way she used to because you have to check the ditches and yards for needles. That is bizarre.
That is so sad. I mean, what in the world? HIV, and they're talking about, a religious rights bill that discriminates against gays and stuff.
Of course,
they have bigger problems, and then they'll blame the gays for the HIV.
And that's what they've done long ago, and not knowing that HIV, in my opinion, and the research I've done, was created in a petri dish and spread via vaccines. And I mean, that's a show altogether. But yeah, this whole Indiana pizza thing it's bizarre.
Yeah, it's like that freedom rights bill, religious freedom bill that was signed by the governor of Indiana last week, and they had to update it to include LGBT protections because there's this pizza shop that made this big stink on national TV, and they said that they weren't going to cater to a gay wedding.
Last I checked, and I know a lot of gay guys. I live in the heart of Wilton Manors, which is the San Francisco.
And don't you think they want pizza for their wedding?
No, I'm sorry, but none of the gay friends of mine would ever in their life would think about having pizza at their wedding.
They would, like a pepperoni.
No,
maybe
they're too classy for that. I mean, these rednecks in here in Indiana, I'm sorry, maybe they do there, and no disrespect to anyone, but no, I think these people did this to create publicity. And
they made some good money.
Oh, they have, because they created
GoFundMe account like $500,000.
That was like a couple of days ago. I'm sure it's a lot more now. That is crazy.
That's all probably Christians giving to them because they're like all up in arms about the rights of them to be able to not give somebody, a cake or a pizza if they don't believe in what they do.
Last I checked, it doesn't bother them. It's not like people are asking them to marry. It's like it's a person's personal preference. It's the way they are. How dare they discriminate that way?
Well, this lady was really bold in her, in her commentary to this news, woman that was interviewing her. And here's what she had to say.
Restaurant that they agree with Governor Pence and the signing of this bill. They say they have a right to believe in their religion and protect those ideals. If a gay couple was to come in, like say they wanted us to provide them pizzas for a wedding, we would have to say no. Crystal O'Connor and her family are standing firm in their beliefs tonight. They've owned Memories Pizza and Ice Cream in Walkerton for almost 10 years, a
lifestyle that you choose. I choose to be heterosexual. Choose to be homosexual. Why should I be beat over the head because they choose that lifestyle?
Instead, they want to beat us and people like us over the head with their religious beliefs. I mean, it's crazy. God and Jesus, doesn't discriminate against us at all. God loves everyone.
Well, there's this really interesting op-ed piece that I found on Facebook the other day, and it's an open letter to Christian bakers in Indiana. And it starts off by saying, "Dear bakers, you've been getting a lot of attention recently, especially since the new law passed that would likely allow you to refuse to make cakes for gay weddings. It's certainly worth asking how to interpret the First Amendment on this issue, but perhaps first we should ask what the Gospels say."
As you may remember, Jesus' first miracle was at a wedding party. He provided wine for a bunch of people who were already drunk. Not exactly where you'd expect the Messiah to begin, but his mom told him to, and it's not wise to argue with a Jewish mother.
Did Jesus grow out of this party-going phase? By all accounts, no. At every stage in the Gospels, we find him with prostitutes, tax collectors, Roman soldiers, and even anarchists. I know what you're thinking. Jesus didn't approve of their lifestyles, and you're right, but what didn't stop him from spending time with them and caring them, Jesus never let the fact that people are sinners keep him from meeting them where they are, sharing food with them, laughing and crying with them. His no to people's self-destructive behaviors and the lies they trap themselves in always came from within a full-blooded yes to their identity as beloved children of God. It's one note of condemnation within a grand symphony of compassion.
If we see it this way, Jesus bringing the booze to the wedding party fits in perfectly with the rest of his life. This is the same Jesus who taught us to give our cloaks to those who steal our tunics. The same Jesus who healed the ear of one of his captors. The same Jesus who got down on his knees and watched Judas' feet the night he was betrayed.
God doesn't have to approve our lifestyles in order to go out of his way to serve us. That's not just a footnote in the Gospels, it's the whole good news. Thankful for it every day, because God does not fully approve of my lifestyle, my pride, my apathy, my hard-headedness, but he stays with me. He supports me, and he loves me. We have a God who wanders with those who are wandering and parties with those who are partying.
So what about gay people asking you to make their wedding cake? I'm not saying you have to condone their behavior, nor that you have to pretend to, but you have to serve them with the same messy, humble, all-forgiving love that Jesus shows you. My advice, regardless of the laws, bake the cake. Bake the biggest, tastiest, gayest cake you can, and do it for the glory of God. Because Jesus' first miracle was at a wedding, and according to Revelation 19, his last miracle will be at a wedding too. He will look at a mess of sinners like us and once again say, it is good. As we live between those two weddings, we should take every opportunity to celebrate. We can rejoice with those who rejoice because we know God is bringing new wine to the reception. Definitely. And I'm wondering if all these organisms that they're finding and discovering on Earth is the aliens' way of going into Christians' mind and maybe softening a bit of their bigotry.
I think that's your cue to us going into the paranormal segment of our show.
Yes.
Well, there's this article that we found where this scientist found alien organisms that he's claiming that were discovered above the Earth. And it goes like this. It's not easy convincing the world you found aliens, but that's what one professor, a British professor, says he's done over and over again. His latest proof, he tells me, is his strongest yet. Should we take him seriously?
In fall of 2013, Milton Wainwright, a researcher at the University of Sheffield in the United Kingdom, made international headlines when he claimed that microorganisms he found in the stratosphere were not of this world. The organisms are believed to come from a class of algae called diatoms, were collected roughly 16 miles above the Earth's surface using a balloon and, according to Wainwright, have been raining down on Earth, carried by meteorites for perhaps many millennia.
The story goes something like this. Wainwright found these organisms 16 miles above the Earth. He says that's too high for any life from Earth to float in a jet stream, and he says the organisms are too heavy to get up that high without a recent volcanic blast. He says there were no recent blasts before the expedition, and furthermore, the collection apparatus showed tiny divots in it, suggesting that these organisms hit the tin with some sort of speed. His conclusion then is that these organisms came from space.
He quotes, "This, we think, is deflated balloon like a biological entity. Perhaps when inflated, it aided flotation in the atmosphere or sea of another world," Wainwright said. While we found aliens, headline played well among the tabloids of the world, Wainwright's discovery was unceremoniously tossed aside by science journalists.
The methodology was sloppy. The conclusions were not at all supported by the evidence, and heck, he hadn't even established that the rocks they found were in fact meteorites, Phil Plait wrote.
All the time when you walk outside, you're being pelted with organisms that come from space. Plait isn't wrong. The original evidence was flimsy, and there was no shortage of scientists standing in line ready to say so, but few said he was outright wrong. Many who spoke out at the time said that while there wasn't enough evidence to call these things aliens, panspermia, the idea that aliens' life may regularly travel to Earth from space, isn't entirely nuts.
Now Wainwright has made another claim. He says he has found these organisms 25 miles above the Earth, that they test positive for DNA, and that they have masses that are 6 times bigger than the size limit of a particle which can be elevated from Earth to this height, even following a violent volcanic eruption. Wainwright announced the find in an email to some of his students at Sheffield, who naturally posted the thing on Reddit.
So I called Wainwright to hear what he has to say. Let's make it clear now. I have no idea if Wainwright has indeed found aliens. His first paper was published in a somewhat dubious journal, and it certainly didn't contain extraordinary proof of alien life, which is what one of the NASA scientists said he would need in order to take Wainwright's claims seriously.
These organisms are biological, have a definite structure, and are not related to organisms on Earth. We sent balloons and a sampler and found no pollen or grass, nothing up there to contaminate. It was completely pristine, Wainwright told me. There are impact events on the sampler. They make craters on the sampler. If they come up from Earth, they would be coming up against gravity itself.
For this reason, we think they are coming from space, he added. All the time when you walk outside, you're being pelted with organisms that come from space.
Wainwright says his newest paper has been accepted in an international astrobiology journal, but hasn't said which one, and hasn't said when the new findings will be published. He seemed taken aback when I emailed him about it and wasn't quite ready to discuss the new findings, but agreed to talk because the email was already on the internet.
Take this paragraph with many grains of salt, but hypothetically, Wainwright's discovery would fundamentally change much of what we know about the origin of life on Earth and about biology in general. He says comets could seed life throughout the universe and could, in fact, be the origin of life altogether. He says that instead of continuously evolution from a couple cell millions of years ago, there could be many evolutionary trees, no common ancestor, just a bunch of different common ancestors that landed here at different times.
When I ask why they don't believe it, they say, because it can't be true. Wainwright says he knows how people talk about him, and he knows that few believe him, but he's still plodding along.
NASA is going to have to show it for people to ultimately believe it. Wainwright said if NASA printed it, people would believe it. All we can do is keep moving it, pushing it out, keep publishing it, hope someone will look into it. It seems unbelievable.
The thing is, NASA may do it. NASA has a nascent balloon science division, and it is increasingly doing experiments in the stratosphere. And scientists have long been interested in and have reported finding organisms in the stratosphere. But many of those discoveries have been ignored or attributed to contaminated rockets carrying life from Earth and back down where it is, quote-unquote, discovered.
In the meantime, Wainwright is continuing to send balloons into the atmosphere. He's hoping to run some DNA tests in the future and wants his evidence to be as rock-solid as possible.
All we can do is keep going. We've got another 10 launches going out. He said, I give these talks at meetings, and no one tells us what we're going wrong. But when I ask why they don't believe it, they say, because it can't be true. There's been a lot of complete avoidance of the issues.
On that, Wainwright isn't quite right. Lots of scientists have said why they're skeptical. They've posited how the microbes could reach that high. They've said what specifically they need to see before they believe in alien life. Amino acids that are unlike those found on Earth. Without seeing his paper, it is impossible to take his newest claim any more seriously than the first one.
But still, it seems likely that we might have found something up there. No scientists or journalists have suggested that he's lying about actually finding the organisms, and that alone is notable. Anything that manages to survive 25 miles above the Earth's surface is surely worth further study.
But if they make this true, then there's a lot of things that would come into play, and I think,
he's probably onto something.
Yeah, but they're going to probably kill him, get rid of him.
Well, I hope he doesn't get killed.
Well, what happens when somebody tries to shape things a bit with the status quo, especially religious belief, because then that will make that a lot of the life that we have here on Earth has come from alien places that have actually evolved, and then we know how the religious feel about evolution. And
that's another show.
That's another show. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. We're really running late here. We got 3 minutes before the actual show ends. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. Wednesday is our health and nutrition section. I was going to share one of our songs, but we'll have to leave that for Wednesday since we're running kind of low on time. So stay tuned for that song that Lena and I did a cover called Stuck on You, but now you'll have to listen to next Wednesday to listen to that song. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. Remember, if you can't live your truth,
then it's just not worth living.
Good night.
Good night.